This is Suzanne Wagner of the C.G. Jung Institute of Los Angeles. In the next hour, you will view a conversation I held with Maud Oakes in Big Sur, California, in the summer of 1980. Maud Oakes was an artist, ethnologist, and author who met Dr. C.G. Jung in 1951. In later years, she became an active member of the Friends of the Jung Institute of San Francisco. In the course of many years of research and adventure, she wrote several significant books on the symbolic expression of meaning in myth, ceremony, dream, and art. Maud was born in 1903 on Bainbridge Island near Seattle, where she experienced much happiness in being close to nature in her early years. Later, she moved to New York City and attended private schools. She focused on art, practicing as a painter while exploring her interests in the art and religion of indigenous people, Oriental philosophy, and the newly emerging work of C.G. Jung on the nature of the psyche. Maud first saw Jung in person when she attended a lecture with her friends, Mary and Paul Mellon, given by Jung in New York City in 1937. Maud became interested in Jung's description of the collective unconscious. In 1941, with a grant from Paul Mellon's foundation, she began her adventures as an untrained ethnologist. She lived among the Navajo of New Mexico for nearly 2 years, studying their religious practices and making friends with medicine men and women. She developed a close relationship with Jeff King, an old medicine man who eventually trusted her enough to tell her in detail an old legend and the blessing ceremony that went with it, which she recorded in word and in sand painting images and published in a book where the two came to their father. This was the first publication of the distinguished Bollingen Series, edited by Heinrich Zimmer and Joseph Campbell. A few years later, Maud received another grant, and this time went to the western highlands of Guatemala. She lived there for 2 years among the Mam Indians, who are direct descendants of the ancient Mayans. In 1951, she published a book illuminating her experiences there and the mixture of ancient Mayan and modern Christian myths, which were at the center of their spiritual life. This book is entitled The Two Crosses of Todos, Santos. Maud's relationship to Jung developed much further after she met with him privately at his Bollingen retreat while accompanying her cousin Jerome Hill, who was beginning a film on Jung. Maud became fascinated with the large stone Jung had carved and placed in his garden in honor of his 75th birthday. She sensed that the essence of the individuation process was somehow contained in the symbols on this stone. She spent many years after this meditating on the stone's symbols. Later, she did research and active imagination to unlock the meaning of this stone for Jung, for herself, and for others. Eventually, she published a distillation of her reflections in a book entitled The Stone Speaks. This book was her last one and came out in 1987. Before publishing this book, she had entered into personal analysis with Dr. Joseph Henderson of San Francisco. In 1963, she collaborated with Dr. Henderson on a book amplifying the meaning of many myths and legends entitled The Wisdom of the Serpent. Maud lived for over 30 years on Partington Ridge in Big Sur. Only after her house burned to the ground in an accidental fire did she move nearer to the city of San Francisco, where she lived for many years. She died in her last home in Carmel, California, in 1990. Maud, can you tell me how you came to live up here on Partington Ridge?
Well, I'd just come back from Guatemala, and when I was in Guatemala, I met Louisa Jenkins, and she is a painter and is very well known in Big Sur and Carmel, and she suggested I come down and see the land that she bought. So I came down and we camped here, and the minute I looked over and saw those mountains there, I just knew it was so like Todos Santos that I would have to live here. So I met a Christian Science healer who was in a house here, and she said, if I ever sell this, I'll let you know. So then I went to Egypt, and she sent me a telegram there saying the house was up for sale. She was moving, and so I asked her how much, and it was under $50,000, if you please, a house all built and 4 acres.
Oh.
Imagine in those days. So I told her that I would offer her 48, and it would be in cash because my mother had just died and I had the cash. So she accepted. I got it for 48. And that's how I came here.
Sounds as if it was meant to be.
Yes, I think it was meant to be. She was a great friend of Henry Miller's.
I see. So he was living here at the time you moved here?
He was, yes, he was already down there. She had helped build the house that he was in.
I see.
But she was so sweetie, and she told me before I went east to Egypt, she told me that everything in the world, there was no negative, everything was positive. And I said, well then, you can't believe in nature. And she said, what do you mean? Well, I said, all around you is nature, negative and positive. And she said, oh no, everything is positive. So I went east, and when I came back and paid her for the house, she said, Maud, you're right. Things are negative and positive. I looked it up. Do you suppose it was in a book? She looked it up. Or in life. I don't know.
She found it in a book.
Yes. But, so then I moved here. And
so you had had your experience in Guatemala with the Mayan Indians before, and with the Navajo.
Yes, that's right.
And do you think that set you up for needing to live in a place with a lot of nature?
Yes.
Near.
Oh, I knew that
nature.
I wouldn't live in a city for anything if I could help it. Even though I'm in one now. No, it was just, we had no electricity, no telephone, and we were really like camping in a way. It was heavenly. I loved it. And I had 2 dogs and a cat. So we had lots of fun, and lots of rattlesnakes were around.
And you didn't mind that?
No, there were many all around. Well, I only saw one. I was very lucky, and every time I asked people to come and stay in my house when I was going away, they saw the rattlesnakes.
Ah?
The rattlesnakes seemed to come right on the veranda.
Oh my goodness.
But I was lucky.
So you never had any trouble with
Just
that?
once.
Were you ever bitten?
No, I came through the gate with my dogs, and I saw this rattlesnake coiled and was hissing. So I quickly, they went through the gate so fast they didn't see it, so I took them and put them in the car, and then I went back and looked at it, and I saw it bulged in its body, so I knew it had eaten a rat or a mouse or something. I didn't know what. So then I looked at it, and it was so beautiful. I couldn't kill it. I had a shotgun, but I couldn't kill it, so I called a neighbor, and he came up and killed it, and it had 8 rattles. That's a lot, you know.
It is. There's the negative in nature. I've been told they don't have rattlesnakes or poisonous snakes in Switzerland.
In Switzerland? Oh, really?
In the mountains there.
I wonder why.
The snakes are not poisonous. I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, so when you met Jung at Bollingen, that must have felt very simpatico to you.
Oh, yes. Very much so.
No electricity. Well, how did you first learn about Jung?
He had given this lecture at Yale, And Dr. Jung was up on the stage, and all these Jungian women were fussing over him, you know, bring him this and put him here and there and all that. And I saw him sort of do like this, shake his shoulders, and they got the hint. And they sort of walked away, and he went over into the corner, and I watched him intent, and he reached down into his pocket, and he brought out a piece of wood and a penknife, and he began to whittle with his back to all of them.
All of them.
I just loved it. But the interesting thing was that night I had a dream, and I dreamt that I was walking along and I saw a medieval sort of castle house, and it had a moat around it. And the moat was dry. There was no water. And I looked down in the moat, and here was a full-blown red rose, absolutely beautiful. And I went down into the moat, and I took the rose, and then I woke up. And that hinges on some other dreams that came later. So that was, you see, telling me. The Mellons invited me to go to a dinner for Dora Kolff. So there was a dinner of about 10 people. So at the dinner, Dora Kolff, in the middle of it, suddenly said, "I can't understand you Americans. You just don't know anything about your great heritage." And she said, "I'm talking about the American Indian." And something came up in me, and I spoke out, and I said, "Well, I do know a lot about the Indians." And I said, "I would give anything to go out and work with Navajo shamans." And then afterwards, Paul, who I didn't know terribly well then, came up to me and he said, "Maud, would you really like to do this?" And I said, "Yes." Well, he said, "Why don't you write to the Old Dominion Foundation, tell them you would like to work with the Navajo Indians and give your assets." I said, "I have no assets." And he said, "Oh, come off now. Of course you have some assets." Well, I'd say maybe I have 3 or 4. One would be that I don't have any blinders on, the way they put on horses, you know, that they just look straight ahead. And I said, the second one would be that I am not an anthropologist or an ethnologist. I'm just an ordinary person. The third thing is that I'm an artist, and I see everything very clearly because I've been a painter up to then. And the fourth thing is that I have no racial discrimination, no feeling of racial discrimination. So it seems this letter was sent in, and Mr. Shepard, who was the head of the foundation, was so amused by it. Oh, I said, I'm an automobile mechanic, because I'd worked for the Red Cross during the war, you know, as a mechanic. And I'd went through this whole course, you know, of taking cars apart and putting them together. I just loved it. All except the electrical part, because that gives you shocks, and I didn't like that. So anyway, they gave me the grant. And I went out. I had to have an old hogan, you know, the Indian name for a house, which there was an old hogan there, and I'd fix it up, and I'd work in that. Then the Indians would come and see me, which they did. And I'd say, "Come on in and have a smoke," or "Come on in and have a Coke," you know. And then I used to pray every night, "Please keep me open to receive." This to me is very important in life. And I've told no end of young people this. Keep open. Don't judge with your mind whether this is going to do you any good or not. So I sat down and I illustrated it in the way that they would understand and in their earth colors, you see. And I did about 5 or 6, and I put them up on the wall. And pretty soon the Indians looked in, and they came in, and they went up, and yeah, you know, they understood this right away. Well, then, in about 5 days, they'd come back with 5 more Indians. And pretty soon I had no end of Indians. Then I located the first medicine man that I was going to work with. And that night I had a dream. I've done an illustration of it. And I dreamt that I was sitting nude in the medicine man's basket on yellow cornmeal. And yellow is the color, female color. And the wind god was looking down at me in the basket. I'm a little tiny figure, and this great big wind god with a long neck, because the longer the neck, the more power he has from their point of view. So I did this, and I thought, can I show this to this medicine man? Maybe he won't ever come back. And I told this to Dr. Jung, and he said, that old mind. When I told Dr. Jung, and he said, what did you do? Well, I said, I told him the dream. And what did he say? He said, if you were an Indian, it's a good dream, and if you were an Indian, I'd give a prayer over you. And I said, what difference does that make? I want the prayer. So he said, all right, so he gave the prayer. And the essence of the prayer was, I walk in beauty, you see. I'm on the path to beauty. Beauty's above me, beauty's below me, beauty's all around me, and it's quite a little prayer. He said, this ceremony is to drive the poison out of you, of the white man.
I see.
Yes, I should have said that.
It's like cleansing your heart.
Yes, that's it. Which opened the way. It really was amazing.
That is amazing.
And in the middle of it, he said to me, what is the most important thing in the world? And I didn't have time to even think, you see. And I said, a heart. And he said, you're right, but the white man has taken the Indian's heart away. The Indian had a heart before the white man came. And then I didn't say anything. Well, anyway, he was the one that said to me, now, if you really want to collect the most important things, you're going to have to go through an initiation, which is a purifying ceremony. It's called a blessing ceremony, which I did. That was 2 days, I guess, 2 nights and 1 day. And after that, the Indians would give me anything. I'd never expected anything to come out, you know, from the Navajo, but 3 things came, where the 2 came to their father, and then another book called Beauty Way, I think. And then I had done, you see, these paintings and drawings of medicine men, and I think I collected 78 sand paintings, and with Mary Wheelwright and her sand paintings, we were shown in the National Gallery in Washington, and then they went around the United States to different cities. They were shown in San Francisco and all that. So it, to me, who'd never had anything happen to, it was very interesting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But your dream was what really opened the way.
Oh, yes.
That dream, and he knew when you had the dream that
Yes. Yes, it really did.
Okay.
And you know that was exactly 6 months that I'd been there. And when I went to Guatemala and worked with the Mam Indians, the same thing happened. In 6 months, I had another dream. It was 6 months it took me in Guatemala to make friends with the Indians and trust me. And then I had this dream. Would you like to hear the dream?
Yes.
Well, I dreamt the Guatemalans in my village where I was, they had red and white striped pants like Uncle Sam. And then they had lovely blouses with red and white and hand-woven coats. So in this dream, I saw an old man coming towards me. I was in an ancient village of some kind. I think it was European more than Indian. And I saw, on my right was a fountain. And I saw this old man coming, and he came up to me and he said, I want you to take a part in a play I'm going to do. Well, I said, what part? Well, he said, I want you to be a man. And I want you to act in this play. But I said, I'm a woman, I'm not a man. Well, he said, that doesn't make any difference. I want you to take this part. So I said, all right, I will. And the minute I said that, water began to come out of the fountain. There'd been no water coming out of the fountain. It came out of the fountain. And then I woke up. Oh, I forgot to say, I looked down and I was dressed as an Indian man with red and white striped pants. So that was the beginning, and then I want to tell you that things came so fast that I could hardly record them. It's almost as if, you know, something has to happen in your deep unconscious to work with the Indians. And then when it comes up, you see it came up in this dream. The Indian senses this because they trusted me after that, and the same with the Navajo. You know, I told you about the Navajo dream.
Yes, the dream of the corn in the sitting in the corn in the basket.
Yes.
That's unbelievable. And the thing you had to accept was a total reversal, that you would play the role of a man.
Yes.
And you had to be so open to accept that.
Yes. I became a doctor in the village.
Now, do you think there's
This
any...
happened right after the dream.
Ah, is there any connection with the dream, do you think? I mean,
Yes, about 2 nights later there was a knock on my door.
Uh-huh.
And I saw there was a woman there with a baby, and she came in with the baby. And I know nothing about babies. And she said, "Oh, Senorita, I've been to shamans and no one has helped me and I need help and my baby's very ill." She spoke Spanish, not all the women did. So I said, "Well, what's wrong with your little boy?" And she said, it was a little boy, "It won't take milk." Well, I took its temperature, and it had no temperature at all. And then I looked at her in her eyes, and I saw her eyes were all bloodshot, and I put my hand on her head, and she had a fever.
Ah.
So I said, "Where have you been?" And she said, "I've been down picking coffee in the fincas." Well, I said, you have malaria. And I said, her whites of her eyes, you see, showed this. And I said, "I will give you some pills, and you must take this, and your baby is not sick at all." And I told her, then I got my little Indian maid to come and explain in Indian too. And I said, "You must do this very carefully and then come back when you're well." But I said, "Now, don't you know someone who's nursing their baby? Because your baby can't take your milk." And she said, "Oh yes, my sister has a baby." Well, I said, "You do that." So that's the way it started. Then, after about 6 months, I had so many people coming to my door that it wasn't funny. Some I could help most of them, but some of them I had to refuse. And strange things. Then I began to go out into the country with my little suitcase, like a medicine man, on horseback. And they would send word for me, and I'd go out. For instance, there was a wonderful old boy, and he sent for me, and I arrived. He was a dancer in the past, a famous dancer, and his leg was open where he'd hit it with an axe, and it was all infected. And the glands in his leg were infected, I could see. And I looked in, and in this thing was a worm. And this was the worst thing I had to do. I had to remove that worm. And then I had them boil water, and I dressed it and put sulfur. We didn't have penicillin then. Put sulfur in it, and he recovered. So I was fascinated because I'd always wanted to be a doctor. That really pleased me. I didn't meet Jung again until I went with my cousin, Jerome Hill, to call on him. In fact, Jerome wanted to take a movie of him, you know. And he sent Eric Anderson first to talk to Jung, and Jung said no, he wouldn't have movies taken of him by anyone. But in the end, he weakened and said he would. So we went on to see Dr. Jung and watch the movie taking.
Dr. Jung, scene 3, take 1. Don't begin yet, Dr. Jung.
Was that at Bollingen?
Yes. And we went there, and Angulo's daughter was there too, and Jung's secretary, and he showed us all over. And I saw this in the garden. I saw this extraordinary stone, and the minute I saw it, this mandala stone with a little figure in the middle, it just did something to me. Well, then when they were taking the movies of Jung, Romy asked him what it meant, because it was in Latin and Greek. And he said, "Well, it's enigmatic." Well, Romy said, "Enigmatic or not, I'd like to know what it is." So he told us, and it meant nothing to us, you see, but it was all written down.
Here is a Latin inscription. It's a very cryptic text that would need a lot of commentary. But I give you the mere translation. The stone speaks now, being personified, of himself, and says, "Orphanos sum, solus tamen ubique reperior, udo sum sed mihi contrarius." I am an orphan, alone, yet I am found everywhere. I am one, but I am contrary to myself. a youth and an old man at the same time. I have known neither father nor mother, because I must be lifted up from the depths, like a fish, or I fall down from the sky, like the white stone. In woods and on mountains, I am walking about, but I am hidden. I lie hidden in the innermost of man. I am mortal for everyone, and yet I am not touched by the mutation of time.
Did he notice your fascination with the stone at that time? And
Well, I
did he-
told him I was fascinated by it. And I said, what is the little figure in the center? And he said, well, it's Mercury.
Did that mean anything to you at the
Oh,
time?
yes, of course it did. I'm a Gemini, and Mercury is my
I see.
planet. And I've always admired Hermes Mercury. I always put them together, the two names, because they are together. And well, then the next time, then I went home, and my cousin enlarged a huge picture of the stone. And I decided, he wanted me, for the movie he was doing of Jung, he wanted me to do what I could with the translations of the stone. And I decided that I'd do it for a book.
I see.
I was so enthralled with the whole thing that I decided I wanted to see if I could find out what it meant. And then I finally wrote to Dr. Jung, in which I said, I'm not an analyst and I have no degrees, and I'm just an ordinary person, but your stone did something to me.
Can you show me the quarry that this stone came from?
Well, the quarry is right over there. It's, you see there, that wall of rock.
Yes.
Below that meadow. There's the quarry. It's now against the light, you can't see it properly.
I think I see it. And then the boat brought it over to here.
Oh, yes.
Did you order this stone?
Oh, yes.
Was it for the building of that house?
Oh, yes. We had all the stones practically from here from over there to our two quarries.
Well, how did it happen that this one stone came?
Well, that's a funny story about that stone. We needed a certain stone for that wall behind the tower, and we gave the exact measurements to the foreman, and he took them down properly. And the next day they brought a load of stones, and but we looked in vain for the stone we had ordered. It was a pretty big stone we ordered. Instead, they brought a perfect cube. Well, that stone here. And of course, my mason didn't like it at all and said they should take it back, but I took it as a hint. I leapt on it at once. I said, now this is the stone I need. And instantly I had the idea I would put it there with an inscription. You know, that cube caught my fantasy.
But you'd cut stones before, haven't you?
Oh yes, I have learned cutting stone in that quarry over there.
Really?
Yes, I have built that house here.
Well, how long did you work on it?
With two workmen. Well, we had it up practically in 6 weeks.
Well, how long did you work on the cutting of this stone?
Oh, on the stone, well, off and on since last September.
So really a year?
Well, a year, yes. But only off and on when I was here.
Did you carve all four sides of it?
No one knows only the three sides, because the back side is invisible, it's against the bushes.
And what, is it sandstone?
Yes, it is a hard blue sandstone, very hard.
And then I asked him if I could come to Bollingen again. And he wrote back and said yes. So the next time we saw Jung, which was, I think, in about 6 months. I hadn't done much. I was doing research, you see. And we saw him not at Bollingen. We saw him in Zurich. I said to Jung, oh, that stone must symbolize everything that you believe in, or something like that. And he said, oh, not at all. It just meant nothing to me. It was like a song, and my heart just sank. Well, we stayed there an hour, Romy and I, and talked with him and all about things. And I told him I'd been working with the Indians, and that's when I told him the story about the Indian that later gave a prayer over me. So when we were ready to leave, he turned and looked at me and he said, everything I believed in could be on that stone. Isn't that something? And before that, he said something about, you know, I never lied until I was, did he say till I was older or till I was younger? I couldn't remember. But anyway, I thought, well, you certainly lied to me. But I felt just like $1 million, because I really knew.
You knew?
Yes. And then we went into the house, and I kept saying, oh, show me your studio, show me your workroom, show me your studio, to myself, you see. And by the time we got into the entryway where you enter the house, he turned and he looked right at me and he said, would you like to see my studio?
He got the message.
Yeah, he got the message. So I went up, and that was in the tower. And it was absolutely fascinating. He had all over the wall pieces of bone and shells, and he had vellum manuscripts, and he had Tibetan things hanging on the wall, and it was a small room, but it was jammed with things. And then this big long table, sort of a small window looking out where he worked.
And this is where he wrote?
Yes.
Did you see any of the paintings that he did on the wall?
No, well, I just noticed the Tibetan ones.
In meeting Jung, you met Mrs. Jung, Henry Jung. Did you ever meet Toni Wolff?
Yes, once.
What were your impressions of her?
Well, she was with people, so, you know, it was down when I went down to Frau Ferber's, you know, lectures down by the lake. And I just saw her there, but I was introduced, but nothing more. I didn't talk with her.
Did her work speak to you at all on the
yes.
feminine, on the...
Oh, I thought she was excellent. Very wise woman. So then I went back to America, and I worked 2 years on the stone, and later 2 more years. So there were four years doing research, and it was fascinating. And Dr. Henderson said to me, you know, you're not really a research person but he'd figured out about me, you shouldn't be doing researching. Well, I said, I've done it all my life. So. Isn't it funny how, yeah.
Meaning that you really aren't the type. That's not your personality.
Type. Yes, that's what he meant. Yeah. So then I wrote Dr. Jung and said that I had worked 2 years. This was the first time of 2 years, and I would like to send him the manuscript. And that I was not an analyst. And I said, I have no degrees, and I'm not well known like all your people, but still I went ahead, you see, and did this. So I sent it on to him, and in a very short time, my manuscript was returned, corrected by him, with pencil, and he said he was very interested in it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So
encouraging to you.
Yes, encouraging. So then I worked 2 more years on it, and then I took it to him, and that was then I saw him again in Bollingen, alone. He was absolutely marvelous. I just loved Jung, and I felt so at home sort of with him, and he had this twinkle in his eye, sort of a naughty twinkle. And he also was stubborn. I could see as stubborn as I am. You could tell it in his mouth.
You know, by the time you met him, you had already had some contact with the shaman in the Navajo culture and also in Guatemala. Is that true?
Well, I went to Guatemala in
45? I was interested in his personality. I mean, do you find that there are characteristics of the shaman personality?
Oh, yes. I think there's no doubt about it.
Could you say a little about it? I mean,
well, to me, he was a wise, very wise man, and a doctor, woodsman, and shaman. Those 4 things.
but you know what you're telling about the way he first said no, it was just a song.
Yes.
And then he turned later and said it was everything.
Yes.
That's very trickster-like.
Yes, it is.
And he must have known exactly what he was doing.
Yes,
Don't you think?
I think so. And he was a Leo. He's a Leo. Did you know that?
Yes.
Yes. And
What
I
does
had
that mean
Leo
to you?
rising.
Ah, I see.
So that made a bond. But he was really charming. And then he told me as I was leaving, have you seen the murals in Lascaux? And I said, no, I hadn't. And he said, you be sure and go and see them before you go back to America. So my cousin and I went and we saw them. And we had an extraordinary experience because when we were in the deepest level of the cave where the little shaman is and the bull, the lights went out. And they had electricity, you see, and they all went out, so that the guide had to light a sort of as kind of a torch, a rag on a piece of wood, and held it up. And here we saw this all the way they'd seen it, as they had painted them.
With no electricity, just the firelight.
Yes, it was fascinating. And so that gave me an excuse to write him another letter. So when I came back to the United States, I wrote him another letter. And I said, you know, Dr. Jung, I want to thank you for all you've done and taken the trouble. He wrote these letters by hand, you know, and he corrected the manuscript by hand. And taking all the trouble you have, and I want to say that I feel you've been too nice. I said, I don't think you have been, I said, you haven't told me everything you felt about it. So then he wrote back, and he said, I feel that you are too intellectual. You lack feeling, you see. So then I knew immediately that what he was saying was that I was writing about something I'd had no experience of, analysis. And so I decided then, you see, to go and see Joe Henderson. So I went to see him, but not with any idea. I thought, I'm not going to give him my soul, you know, to fool with, my psyche. So another year went by, and Joe Henderson telephoned me. It was when the telephone was just put in. And he said, I've seen Dr. Jung in Europe, and he asked me if I'd look and see what you have been doing about the stone, or something like that. So I said, where are you? And he said, I'm in Carmel with my wife. Well, I said, come down and have lunch. So they came down. And I saw right away that, of course, he was the one I should experience the individuation process with. So I wrote him a letter after he left and said, will you be my guide in the underworld? So he was. And he was a wonderful guide. And it's interesting how different people are pulled into analysis.
But you see, I think there are people, you seem to have a natural openness to that process. in you? I mean,
Individuation, you mean?
yes.
Well, maybe I have. I don't know. But it made sense. I never had to have it explained to me. And in my dreams, I was quite good with my dreams. And Dr. Henderson always said, now you analyze your dreams, you know, and if there's anything wrong, I'll tell you. But then I noticed one thing, that sometimes an explanation of a dream that I didn't really quite understand, and I'd leave, and then maybe 6 months later it would come up. And you see, I wasn't ready then. But it's there, you know, it comes up, and it made sense then.
Well, in the dream you tell now about Todos Santos, when the man comes and says, if I have a role for you to play, I suppose all the time you were there before was getting you ready for that role.
Oh, probably.
In some way. I mean, I wonder why the dream came right then.
Well, the interesting thing to me was it was the same thing with the Navajo, 6 months.
Ah?
And it was 6 months with the Todos Santos Indians. And it's just your unconscious knows. But the dreams were quite different.
Yeah, very different. Are there women, medicine
Yes,
women?
there are. There was a wonderful medicine woman.
In Guatemala?
Yes, oh, she was a character, and also with the Navajos. But, and then they have a woman called hand trembling expert with the Navajos. And I had that done. It was very interesting. Kind of ceremony.
So the analysis came as the real experience of these things you were so fascinated by.
Yes, yes.
And the analysis pulled you into them.
Yes. And then I found after 1 year I still had a projection on Jung and the stone. So then I put the book away for 5 years and just let myself go.
And that must have, was that difficult to do? Was it hard to put it away?
In the beginning it was, but after a while it wasn't.
When you came back to it then, how was it different?
Well, it was different because I'd had my analysis. I mean, it made such sense, you know, the analysis and individuation. And it fitted in with the translation of the stone because the whole, you could say, the whole individuation process was on the stone, but written in enigmatic writing, in Greek and Latin.
Well, you see, this is a Greek inscription. It begins, Ho aion pais esti paitson petreion paidos he basileie. It is a quotation from Herpaitos. It says, time is a child that plays like a child. A game on a board. The kingdom of the child. Then Telesphoros. This is the name of this little figure here. He is the familiar spirit of the god of the physicians, Aesculapius. The text says, Telesphoros traveling through the dark spaces of the cosmos and rising out of the depth like a star. He points the way. Par e ilioiopulas kai demononairo, to the gates of the sun and the land of the dreams. The latter is a quotation from Homeros. Then you see a division into four parts. Here are the three lightnings, one river. It's the ancient idea of paradise with its four rivers. Three were supposed to be equal, and one has a double meaning, and that's the one here, the river. This is an old alchemistic secret, so-called axioma Maria. This Maria has nothing to do with Mary, but with the Maria Prophetessa, or Judaica. She was a philosopher in the time of Hypatia. That was another woman philosopher living in Alexandria about the 3rd century. It says, this axioma says, from 1 comes 2, from 2, 3, and from the 3rd comes the 1 as the 4th. This axioma has played a very great role through 1700 years of alchemy. Then you see here the sign of the sun, here the sign of the moon. On the left side, Jupiter, on the right side, Venus. Saturn above, Mars below. These four planets are the so-called division into 4, the tetrameria. Here, on the body of the child is a sign of Mercury, and he is supposed to be Mercury, or Hermes, the messenger of the gods. The text refers to him as the one that points to the region of the Westland that is supposed to be the land of the dead.
That first fascination then with the stone was the beginning of your analysis.
Yes, it was, in a way.
Yes. Huh.
I'm sorry I never saw Jung again.
Yes. He didn't ever visit this country, did he, Big Sur country?
No, I don't think so.
I imagine he would have loved it.
He did visit the Indian country.
But you find that his personality was similar to a shaman you might meet, you think?
Yes, I think so. I think Joe Henderson has that too.
Did you sense that when you met Henderson?
Yes, I did, almost immediately. I felt he was like a shaman. And my work was all with shamans,
yes,
with the Navajos, and in Guatemala the same.
And you were acquainted with the dream. I mean, dreams had been an important part of your own experience.
Very much so. When I was about in my early 30s, I guess, I began to have fascinating dreams. And I had one of Dr. Henderson, and I'd never met him, you know. And then I had one of Elizabeth Osterman, and I'd never met her.
Oh my goodness, had you heard of these?
Yes, I'd heard of both of them. And I was very much impressed because the dream I had about Elizabeth was decidedly an initiation dream that had to do with serpents. And as a friend, we went through sort of an initiation thing because she was working with Joe Henderson, you see, and he introduced me to her when I started working with him.
I see.
So that to me was interesting.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the stone and also your experiences as a shaman yourself. From any of your experience with these things, how did you begin to think about the about dying, about death? Did that play a role in any of your experience?
In them?
No, your own death and the whole idea of life after death.
I never thought of death.
You didn't?
No. I mean, death is part of life. And I never think of it. I mean, when my time comes, it comes.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any point of view about life after death?
I think there is life after death of some kind.
Uh-huh.
But I remember a wonderful old Indian called Tata Julian, and he used to come and see me in the evenings. He was an old man.
Uh-huh.
And when he first came, he looked at the magazine upside down. But then he began to see what magazines were like, you know, and all that. And he'd come and we'd talk, and he said to me one day, "Senorita Matilda," they call me Matilda, which is the French for Maud.
Oh.
"Senorita Matilda, what is your God like?" Because the Catholic priest who goes through here once a year, he gave me a card, and on it was a God on a cross all covered with blood. And he said, "Is that your God?" Well, I said, "My God is beyond my comprehension." I said, "I know there's a God way beyond us, but it's way up there someplace, and I mean, it's just beyond my comprehension." And he said, "That's what we believe."
Uh-huh.
So.
I gather he wasn't too fond of this image,
No, he didn't
image
like
of
it at all.
Christ on the cross.
No, because he didn't feel that should be in it.
Uh-huh.
The blood and the torture. And,
Uh-huh.
mm-hmm.
Huh. So, do you think in your work on the stone and in the experience of the individuation process that you discover that death belongs? I mean, is that part of it?
Well, it's always been part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that analysis had anything to do with death, as far as I'm concerned, unless something happened in me, you know, that I wasn't cognizant of.
Mm-hmm. Well, the story you've told us about losing your house here, the fire, that in a way was a kind of a death, wasn't it?
Yes, it
death of a
was.
whole
Oh, well, I do feel that
chapter.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Uh-huh.
I didn't understand. I do believe as we go on in individuation that we go through different things that you could call death.
Mm-hmm.
And I always believe that the first death is death for rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what initiation was all about. And I believe strongly in initiation. I feel the individuation process is individuation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is
initiation.
Is initiation, I said the wrong
And
word.
that does involve dying to some past
Yes,
self.
yes.
Uh-huh.
And you're right about the house, because that was the whole past that died.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. When it burned down. I always wonder, should one say burned down or burned up?
It burned everything away, didn't
Yes.
it? Yeah. Well, I'm interested in getting some perspective from you about, because you met him earlier, you've worked for so many years on the stone, and you've had all this experience. If you've, how you see him as a figure in history? I mean, do you?
Well, I think he's one of the most important men of this age.
This is a Latin inscription. It is a verse by Arnaldus de Villanova, a famous physician and alchemist of the early 13th century. It reads, "Here is the stone, the insignificant one, cheap concerning price. It is despised by the stupid, all the more appreciated by the wise." C.G. Jung, from gratitude, has made and put this stone in memory of his 75th birthday. That's it.
How do you feel about the future of work like Jung's work and the work that you've done in your life on the stone?
Well, I was thinking about that the other day as I was motoring down here. In fact, it was today. I was thinking, what will the future be? because the Freudian point of view is now being, you know, is nowhere near the way it was. But the thing that interests me is that the young people are so interested in Jung. So I think it'll last quite a long time, don't you?
Yes, more and more young people
Yes.
all the time are reading him. I think that if the world survives, Jung's work will definitely
Yes.
become more and more important.
I think now we're in the pit. And you know, the ancients, all the ancients said, you know, that in the Aquarian age, we were going to go into the pit.
First.
And it would be whether we'd come out or not. And it's certainly happening. Don't you feel that?
Really.